Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. We are getting close to the end of the year and I have gained so many followers this year on TikTok and here on YouTube. So I felt like it was only right to do an updated riding story. I did one of these many years ago, but I really want to go more in depth in this one and just kind of give you all like more info about like where I came from, who I am, and how I got to where I am today. I also just want to say, I know you guys are probably sick of some of the content I've been posting. It's a lot of college stuff and it doesn't always show like that much horse content. It's more like about horses, and I just want to let you know I'm going home in like a week for 9 days and then back here for a week or two, and I'll be home for about 6 weeks, and I have a lot of cool stuff planned for next semester as well, but I promise it's coming. Anyway, let's get into my riding story. So I started riding when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I have an older half sister, which a lot of you wouldn't know, but she always did like 3-day eventing, so cross country, show jumping, dressage, all of that stuff. And she was always like joking and like pushing, you know, to get me a pony for me to be a rider. And then on top of that, my neighbor at the time, who was like a teenager, she would babysit me all the time when my dad was at work and my mom would go to the gym or something. And she was also a rider. So I feel like I had these two girls that I really looked up to, my sister and my babysitter, and they both were riders, and I begged my mom to get me into riding lessons. And I remember going to Dover and picking out my first pair of like paddock boots. I think they were an Ariat pair because they came in like a gray box that had horses on them, and they sat in our laundry room for like months. So we had bought the boots, and I think my parents were secretly hoping I would forget about it and just stick to gymnastics or something. But of course I remembered. And I kept going on about it, so I finally went for a lesson. One of the first horses I ever rode, and like really rode many times as a 6-year-old, was this horse named Wonder. I think that was the first animal other than like a dog that I had truly fallen in love with. He was a lesson horse at this local barn, and he was just a saint. I treated him like my own. I brought him all sorts of things, bought him, you know, saddle pads and things to use, and I loved him. So I ended up doing a summer camp that summer at that farm, where like I would just go every day for a week. At the time, it was literally only me and my best friend, still to this day, Jane, because it was a really like new small barn. We were the only two campers, and all the cool teenagers were like running the camp, and they all had horses and ponies, and I just remember us being like so obsessed with them. So that really got me into it, and I started taking like 1 or 2 lessons a week from there. Then it moved on to, you know, the typical story of like trainers trying to be like, you need to get your own pony, you need to blah blah blah, like get your own horse. And my dad had already had one daughter who rode, so he knew the deal, and he was like, absolutely not, like I'm never buying another pony again, or horse. Like, she can take lessons, but that's it. Well, I'm sure you all know Patton. He was like 6 or 7 at the time. Looking back, like we were so naive, we had no idea. Even though my sister rode, it was like a completely different kind of riding. He was probably too young for such a young kid to ride, and that definitely had us fall into quite some bad habits. At this point, I had moved to the other barn that was owned by this local organization. That was like the Borders barn. It was a beautiful facility with like a huge indoor ring, a lounge, like it was amazing. And I was leasing Patton. We ended up buying him, but he kept stopping at jumps with me. Like every time we'd go to a show, would stop at everything, just wouldn't go around. And of course, like I'm sure a big part of that was me asking for a chip or a long distance, and he just got sick and tired of it. But he also was very young. I think it was just not the most well thought out partnership, but I still love him despite that. So after a while, my trainer was like, we need to get you something like that's been there, done that. So I ended up leasing this pony named Scooter. He was a medium pony, Patton was a small, but they looked exactly the same. I loved chestnuts, and I started doing all the things on him. Scooter was not a fancy pony. He was like a been there, done that, like gonna get you around the ring, whereas Patton was definitely a very fancy pony, but he was just way too green for me. So I ended up leasing Patton out, and I just rode Scooter, and I absolutely adored him. I did a lot with him for like I want to say like a year or two, and then I want to say when I was like maybe 9 or something like that, we ended up buying Angelo, who was this phenomenal small junior hunter at the barn. I still speak to the girl who owned him at the time like now, and she's just such a lovely person. But they were selling selling him because she was going to college, and my trainer was like, you know, Elise needs a horse. Like, she's, you know, getting older. She's kind of growing out of ponies because I've always been so tall. And I remember going to a try-on show and Angelo was there, and my dad was just like spending time with him, and he fell in love with him because Angelo is such a sweetheart. And they ended up surprising me with buying Angelo. Because the girl hadn't gone to college yet, it was like the beginning of the summer. She like still had like junior hunter finals in Devon and stuff to go. So we let her like keep him and do all that stuff on him, even though we had bought him, because I wasn't like quite ready to transition off my pony yet. I still had like little finals and things to do. The girl had gone to college and I started riding Angelo. I took him to a show in Conyers, Georgia, and he was being such a good boy, literally like, you know, hacking me around the 2-6. And I just tumble off. I don't even remember what happened. I think he went to do a lead change, or he can definitely be pretty wild sometimes, and I think he just kind of like went to do his lead change and kind of played a little bit, and I was still very small. And I went flying off the side, put my hand out to catch my fall, and instantly noticed something didn't feel good. I also remember I like ripped my jodhpurs open like around my knee, but I was just there with my dad. It was like a Friday. I'd gone to just do like a practice round to get ready for the weekend, and this was my first show on him, so I was really excited. We go back to the barn because like I'm a little frazzled. They get me some ice to put on my wrist because I was saying it was hurting, and I like remember thinking like this really hurts, but like it's probably just sprained. Like I had never really had a bad fall before, and on top of not having like a bad fall before, I had only ridden ponies, so like I in my head was like, you know, it's just a lot further to fall, that's probably why it hurts. So I end up getting back on. I go into the morning ring, like jump over a few oxers and stuff, and just to end on a good note, and then my dad's like, let's get you a smoothie. It's like an hour drive from my house, but with traffic on Friday it takes forever, so he's like, let's get you a smoothie to like, you know, keep you appeased in the car. So he gave it to me. I remember having it in my left hand and trying to open our Jeep door with my right hand, which at the time you had to like push the button in and then pull, and I couldn't push with my thumb. So I go to like switch hands and put my smoothie in this hand, and it literally like there was no motion. I couldn't hold it. And so I really quickly tried to get in the car with like holding my smoothie in my arm and opening it and like trying to play it off like nothing's wrong, because I didn't like understand. I was just like, oh, it just still hurts. And I got home and my mom took one look at me and I just burst into tears, and she was like, come here, like let's blah blah blah, like put some, you know, ice on your wrist. And I remember her like gently placing the ice on top of it, and I like was like, ow, take that off, like blah blah blah. Like it hurt so bad. And my mom was like, that's it, like we're taking you to the hospital. And I just remember her saying to my dad, like, why didn't you like take her then? And he was like, she said she was fine, you know, typical kid, like getting the dad in trouble, because I was like, no, I'm totally fine, like let me get back on. So we go to the urgent care, we get x-rays done. I remember her coming back in, looking at me and being like, sweetie, like does your wrist hurt? And I was like a little bit. She was like, it's dislocated and it's fractured. We can't do anything for you here. You have to go to the hospital. So my mom immediately takes me to the hospital. I think my dad met us there with like some pajamas, because obviously now it's like 9-10 p.m. at night, so we're gonna be there for a while. They put me under, put my wrist back into place, and then I woke up with a full arm cast, because when you break your wrist or fracture it, they don't want you to be able to like twist it or like move it like this. So I was in a full arm cast. It was like that for 4 weeks, and then I got a short arm cast after that, and I did ride in that even though I wasn't supposed to. So that's that. On top of this whole mess, Angelo had suddenly gone lame. We ended up sending him to get MRIs, and it had shown that he had torn a tendon years ago, and it had just not been taken care of. It healed with lesions on it, and he had to have surgery. Now, I'm not gonna go into this situation too much because one, it was like forever ago. I was young, I don't really know everything. There's no proof, but it was a very old injury, so I don't know how that happened or how no one knew about it, but unfortunately, he went lame. So do with that what you will. He goes to Tennessee to the Jackal Center. He has surgery on his front leg. They said when they opened it up, it was way worse than they thought based on looking at the MRI. And so at this point, we decide to lease a different horse because Angelo's gonna be out for a while. I go to another local farm and try a few horses, some really nice horses, and I got on this one and I just adored him. His name was Calgary, and again, was not a fancy horse by any means in the way of like, you know, being a hunter or something like that, but he was a been there, done that horse, and he was just, I don't know, something with him clicked for me, and I loved him. I was like, that's the one. So we leased him, I think for 2 years. I did the 3 foot on him, and then I moved up to 3.3, and then while we had him, he was older, so we knew he wouldn't be able to jump over 3.3, and my dad had, on a whim, bought this sales horse because him and my mom thought that he looked beautiful, and they were like, you know, it can either eventually be your 3.6 horse or we'll sell it. Like, we weren't really sure. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, how on earth did we get into this situation? Like, this was the most quick, not thought out thing ever, but we had this crazy baby who we'll get into. So we have those two. Angelo's still in rehab. It's time to let Calgary go. My lease was up and my trainer wanted to move me up to the 3.6, and it was one of those devastating moments where it was like, he's not my horse. I can't just like lease him forever and not move up. So I remember going to my last horse show on him and being like just so sad because it was like, this is the last time I'll ever show him, and I had won everything. I was like champion, and you know, he was just a saint. So I was like, it was a great way to end. And I remember my dad that night being like, look at these pictures I like took today, and I'm gonna get choked up even talking about it. I guess the lady who owned him, she was a trainer. She was really nice. He was an older horse. He kind of was definitely going to step down, and she saw how much I loved him and how much he loved me, and I guess she had approached my dad and they'd come up with some really good deal, and we ended up buying Calgary. And so they surprised me with that night. I remember bursting into tears and I remember my dad saying to me like, look, like, you don't have to worry anymore, like, it's all good. Like, I remember I was so upset for so long, not in a greedy or selfish way at all, but like, you all know what I'm talking about. Like, you fall in love with these animals, and I had him for years. It was the first time I felt with any of my ponies or horses that I genuinely like clicked with him. And you know, it was like a bittersweet feeling for a 13, 14-year-old to let go of this animal I love so much. So, you know, I'd been quiet about it, but I definitely was worried. And I just remember my dad saying like, you don't have to worry anymore. He's not going anywhere. But I was moving up, and I was gonna ride this crazy baby in the, like, you know, I was gonna do him in the 3 foot 3.3 and then eventually move up to 3.6. And that crazy animal's name was Chino. It's hard to believe now, I know. And on top of that, Angelo had finished rehab. He was coming back, so I was gonna do him in like, same thing, 3 foot 3.3. And then Calgary, we decided to lease out in the barn to another girl to do like the 2.6 3 foot on, because again, he was such a great horse and he just needed to step down. So I started riding Chino. I was terrified of him. He dragged me around the ring. He didn't listen. He like only galloped, and that was it. It was like gallop or trot, like no in between. And then I remember riding him one day, Chino, and I rode in the 3:30 lesson because I got out of school early enough to. But this other girl, she got out after me, so she rode in like the 4:30 lesson. And I remember untacking Chino at my old barn, and like my mom was like talking or something down back at the ring, and she came and got me, and she was like, I need you to come here for a second. Like, you need to come down to the ring. And I remember being like very confused as to why. I'm like, I'm trying to untack Chino, like, what are you talking about? She's like, no, just come. And the girl who was riding Calgary, she'd had him for like several months. She's the most lovely girl ever. I still adore her and her family to this day. Like, I'm so glad that Calgary had her to ride him. But she was saying like, is this normal? Like, this doesn't feel normal. Like, he was very stiff on his neck one way, like he wouldn't turn his head. She's like, you know, obviously you know him better than I do. She'd only had him a few months. I'd had him for years. And I remember being like, I don't like think so. Like, he never did that with me. I was like, maybe he's just stiff though. Like, horses do get stiff. Maybe he laid funny. Maybe he pulled him off somehow. Like, maybe just get off and give him the day off and like see where he's at tomorrow. So the next day, nothing really changed, and luckily we live in Atlanta, so the UGA Equestrian Hospital is really only like probably 2 hours if you're taking a trailer from us, which is really, really lucky. We're so grateful for that. But they take Calgary there the next day just to see what's going on. And again, like I was maybe 13. Even though I had done a lot of things, I feel like if you're not in a horse family, even if you've been riding for several years, at that point, like, you still don't know everything, you know? And I didn't really grasp, I guess, that maybe there was something more severe going on. And I don't know if that's maybe just because I was young and they didn't want to scare me, like, and maybe my parents knew and I just didn't realize that they knew something more severe was going on. But I remember them telling me that Calgary was going to stay at UGA for a while because he had tested positive for EPM. And again, I was 13. I had no idea what that was, but they're like, it's, you know, it's like a parasite, like he's just a little sick, he needs to be treated. And obviously there are lots of horses who get EPM and they're able to be managed and live with it. Obviously, like, there's no quote unquote cure, like you do this and you get rid of it. But there's definitely horses who live with it and are able to live happily. But they're like, he just needs to be treated and whatever. And this was my parents telling me this. Then he was there for like, I want to say a month or two. I remember being at IEA Nationals and my dad getting a phone call and like stepping out of like the stadium area. I could tell by the look on his face when he came back and the look on my mom's face when he like spoke to her that something was wrong. And I remember saying something about it and they're like, no, like, it's okay. They told me Calgary, you know, still being treated. They thought he was doing really well and we're gonna start to wean him off the medicine because they thought that the parasite that was in his brain had now been killed. Obviously, it can always come back and like he would not have ever been ridden again because his case was so severe. But they thought they had killed it and that he could at least live like a retired, happy life and just be comfortable. So we came back, I went to see him. I remember like I took him out for grass. He was so happy. He was definitely a little different. And he had all these like where he had his IVs in the neck, it was like still all there. But he was eating grass, he was very happy. So I thought everything was going to be okay. That week, they started weaning him off all the drugs because they wanted to get him off all the drugs before they discharged him, from the hospital, and he was going to come home and just retire. I remember I went to the school where we got out at 12:30. It was like a hybrid school and it was a Tuesday and I was meant to go ride. I always rode on Tuesdays and Thursdays and I was about to leave my last class and I had a text from my mom. And she was like, when you get out of class, like, get in the car quickly. Like, I have your lunch here. Like, we have to, like, just get in the car quickly. And I remember being so confused because normally she would pick up me and my best friend who also went to that school and take us to riding and take us to get lunch first. So I said to my friend who was also in my class, was like, what, like, do you know anything about this? Like, I thought, honestly, I thought something had happened, like, with her or, like, she wasn't going anymore. And she was like, no, like my mom just texted me too saying she's picking me up. I didn't really understand what was going on. And I got in the car, it was just my mom, and she was like in tears. And she looked at me and she was like, we're not going to the barn today ride, we are going to UGA and you have to say goodbye to Calgary. I obviously was very confused, very upset. Like I had been told he was doing really well and they were gonna start weaning him off all these, you know, things he was on to bring him home. But I guess when they started taking away all these things that were supposed to kill off this parasite, it was not dead or wasn't all gone. I'm not exactly sure how it works, and it just went ham and started really to attack his brain and his like neurological system. And at that point, because they had just weaned it off, it's not like they could just start pumping him, you know, full of it again to get rid of it. It had gotten so bad it was untreatable at this point. I remember like, you know, being very sad, obviously. But I remember when I saw him, he was in this stall that was fully padded and he was standing there with his head like literally touching the ground. He couldn't hold it up. I remember picking up his head and just stroking him and his tongue was like all twisted and hanging out. He couldn't move his tongue. It was probably one of the most graphic things I've ever seen. And I went home, I went to school the next day, they called my parents, they said it's time. He had gotten worse. I'm so lucky I have the best dad, and he went to UGA and was with him when he passed. They didn't come and get me from school, which obviously at the time I was very angry about, but I'm honestly very glad they did that. I was really young, and anything that, you know, saying goodbye to a horse in that sort of way is horrible, but because he had EPM and it had got to his brain, he wasn't himself. And even to this day, like, Calgary is one of those things, I talk about him all the time in the way of like, I do everything like in honor of him not being himself and having a parasite in his brain. It was just a really horrible experience, unfortunately. I still have his ashes in my room. I kiss them goodnight every night. So if you see that big horse statue in the background of any of my videos, that is Calgary. He stays with me all the time. And in that same week, Angelo went lame again. He went back to rehab. And then that weekend, I went to ride Chino. He tripped in some bad footing. I fell off, broke my collarbone, and got a concussion. So it was like horse died, horse went lame and went back to rehab, and I just broke my shoulder and can't remember anything. It was not a good week, to say the least. I ended up healing from that after a few weeks. I went to junior hunter finals, and again, I'm not gonna go into it too much because this is just not the sort of drama I want to bring to my channel, but something ended up happening on the transportation back from junior hunter finals in Devon to Atlanta, and Chino ended up in UGA in the ICU. It's very hard, I feel like, when you're in a situation or you don't know that much about the industry or anything to just be like, that's it, we have to like move, we have to do anything. So it was definitely one of the hardest decisions I and my family have ever had to make, to move horses who can't speak to you or tell you anything somewhere else and trust that they're gonna, you know, take care of them and not harm them in any way, is really scary. But I implore you, if you feel like something is off with where you are, make the jump. It has changed my life. And this is where we can put away this first half of the story. There's been some great moments, but you know, everything that happened in Calgary, and we move on to what you guys have now seen. So I moved to Windsor Stables, and it has genuinely changed my life. I just had Chino, and already, like, the foundation of things I never learned, flat work, having rhythm, having connection, you know, training this horse to actually collect and use himself and not just drag me around, so much safer. And I started to genuinely learn how to ride. We ended up buying another horse because I had started to show a lot more and Chino just couldn't do it all. I had Nick, and I would do both of them in the hunters and do Chino in the equitation a little bit. I remember my first show with Windsor, we went to WEC in Ohio, and I did this like hunter handy spectacular thing, and I was third out of all these people. And I think that's when it really clicked for Michael, like, this girl hasn't really had the training growing up, but she has the drive. And from there on, we just hit the ground running. Then COVID came, we weren't allowed to go anywhere, but we just stayed home and trained. Luckily in Georgia, it wasn't super strict. We just like had to wear masks in grocery stores and all that sort of stuff, and school was from home, but I was still allowed to go and ride. I just wasn't like allowed in the barn, like without a mask on. And so we really got to work, got training, all the shutdown things lifted, we were able to go to a show, and we had now built this barn at my house. So we ended up bringing Nick, Angelo, and Patton home. So I just had Chino. We ended up going to WEF. The first WEF I went to was definitely a hard pill to swallow. You go to all these local shows and win all the time and just think you're really good. And then I went to WEF, and it was like something I'd never seen before. The people better than I'd ever seen, and the competition was harder than I could have ever imagined. And so it was definitely like this realization of like, this is a big ocean of people, and like I was just a tiny little fish in it, you know? So a lot of learning that first WEF, but I definitely made it worthwhile, and I have some great memories. I then leased a horse to do the equitation on after WEF for the rest of the year. Just wasn't a match. It didn't work out, and I had kind of at this point like didn't have a great experience with it and was like, I don't really want to do the equitation anymore. Like, I'm just kind of over it. I'd rather just do Chino and the hunters. Like, you know, I tried to ride this one horse. It kept stopping with me. I don't know what you want me to do. And we came back from the clay finals and Michael was like, you have to try this horse. And I was like, I don't really want to do the equitation, like blah, blah. He's like, just get on it, just try it. And I'm like, fine. It's another gray. I'm like flatting him around. I ended up like jumping a course on him and my confidence was at like an all-time low because I had just got excused from a clay finals because this horse wouldn't go over anything. And I was jumping around and it was like, everything was just like clicking. I was like, wait, like this is fun. And like so quickly we just clicked, just like the way I did with Calgary. And he was like, if you want it, like we have to sign a contract quick. Like there are a lot of people who want this horse. I had no idea who he was. He's like, his name's Apple. And I was like, what a cool name. Find out he had been 5th at McClay finals that year and I think 8th at Dover finals or something. So a very experienced horse. And I took him to WEF. I went into my first class ever with him, which was the Washington jumper phase, which was never my thing. And straight off the bat, I remember getting an 86.5 and being like, I think this partnership's gonna be a good one. You guys have obviously seen pretty much everything from there. I went to McClay Regionals in Wellington and won on Apple, which was the coolest experience of my life. I never had that big of success at the actual finals, but I was always so grateful for the experience anyway. I aged out. He was meant to go back to his owner and it was actually, again, my parents who were like, oh, Lise, we can't let him go. Like, he's part of our family. So we were able to, like, you know, get in touch with the family who owned him and ask if there was any way we could buy him, and they were so kind and said yes, and we were able to get it done and we kept Apple. And then I had an amazing 2 years as an AO or adult on him. The last show I just did on him was in Kentucky for adult Gladstone finals and I ended up winning, which for me, it was my last show on Apple because we're stepping him down. Just like I said about Calgary, like he's getting old, he needs to do something smaller. But to finish up such an amazing story with him in a finals win was like everything I could have ever asked for. But yeah, so that's my riding story up till now. Yes, obviously there are so many other details I could go into. Like, I do ride for a college team and I'm a junior now. So what will I do when I graduate? I'm not sure, but I have an investment horse named London. I'm not sure what we're gonna do with him yet, so stay posted on that. I don't know what to do. He's perfect. And then I still have Chino. He is just like at his peak right now. Like, that horse is so different than the horse we got when he was 4. He is such a good boy. He tries so hard. He really does jump very well now and is just a great horse for me to ride. So thank you to all of you who have watched this very long video. Thank you to all of you who have been here since the first videos I posted 5-6 years ago. Whether you were here at a few hundred subscribers, whether you have subscribed in the last week, even if you're not subscribed right now, you can press subscribe. It's free. Join the family. I have a lot of exciting things coming and I feel like this community on here is just so fun and healthy. I really am so grateful and adore this YouTube community we've created together. I think it's just really nice to have each other. So that is my riding story. Thank you all for watching. Again, don't forget to subscribe down below. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I'll see you next week. Bye.